Guys, it's your Anna girl and I'm back with another reaction video for you today. And today I'm making part 2 of the Victoria Cross for Valour. So this is part 2. Guys, don't mind the mess, so-called mess behind me. It's summer break and my kids decided that they are building a fort in the living room. So this is their fort. So excuse my messy background. Look at my son waving. But let's get into this video. To all my regulars, my schmegglers, my day ones, my sweetie pies, my sweetie poos, come on in, right back, put a smile on your face and enjoy. To all those who are coming here for the first time, come on in, right back, put a smile on your face and enjoy. Don't forget to do what, guys? Leave your request in the comment section because it will be done. All right? And don't forget to do what again? Hit that like button as much as you can. All right, let's get into the video. Here we go.
Used to taking, looking after other people and not thinking of themselves.
I was feeling probably more for my soldiers than anything else, you know. I was just there. I was a secondary thing to the whole thing, and I was upset that I was losing soldiers, and the enemy was shooting my wounded.
In 1969, during the Vietnam War, Warrant Officer Keith Payne was leading a company of trainee soldiers when they were attacked and routed by massively superior Viet Cong forces. Separated from his fellow officers and wounded, Payne went behind enemy lines time and time again to rescue as many of his raw recruits as he could. That night, he saved the lives of 40 men.
What? 40 men?
I felt that it was my responsibility to get my soldiers out of that situation and not ask anybody else to go and do it.
Wow.
So VC winners do seem to have some things in common, a responsibility for others and a temper perhaps. But does that mean they're all the same? Does that mean there's a type?
Well, the truth is, it's almost impossible to say. It could be something in the water. There's one street in Canada that's provided us with 3 winners. It could be something in the blood. 4 times it's been won by people whose brothers had already won it, and 3 times by people whose fathers had already won it. It's been won by rogues, scoundrels, introverts, extroverts, aristocrats. You probably think you don't have it in you to win one, but you probably do.
Once people do meet us, we're just ordinary people. They know we're ordinary people, and we're, you know, shave and all the rest of the things that people do. But I think they also recognise the fact that we've been tested and stood up to the test.
Isn't that something? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Isn't that? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Isn't that something, guys, to know that the responsibility that he felt, he did not leave it up to anybody else, but to take it on himself because he's responsible for those men. Can you imagine the adrenaline rush that he had to get that done? 40 men. That's a 40. Wow. It must be something in the water or in the bloodline, because there have been persons who have gotten the Victoria Cross to be a second generation, or the father, the son, you know, so interesting.
In Holland in 1944, Major Robert Kane had been tested twice, but worse was to come.
What more worse than what you have been through already, guys?
This was the picture at Arnhem. 40 miles to the south, the Second Army, seen here in red, was bogged down. And with reinforcements unable to get through, the men holding the north end of the bridge were soon to surrender. Kane and the remaining airborne troops were ordered to pull back 3 miles west to the village of Oosterbeek. A horseshoe of defences was then erected in the hope of holding off the Germans until the Second Army could break through. So, picture the scene. Try to put yourself in the head of someone who was here that day. You were part of the largest airborne assault ever, but your mission has been a complete failure. That's the first thing. You were supposed to have been here 2 days, but you've been here for 4. You landed with 12,000 men, but at this point only 3,900 are left. So it's almost certain that you've watched close friends get killed. You've been fighting pretty much non-stop for those last 4 days, so it's unlikely you've had any sleep. You've no food. You're low on ammunition, and the Germans have cut off the water supply to the village that you're holed up in. And there's no way out of the village because you're surrounded on all sides by tanks and artillery and mortars and flamethrowers and 6,000 German troops. And then someone gets a radio working, and you find out that the Second Army, which was supposed to have been here 2 days earlier, is still 5 days away. Imagine how that must have felt. That sense of desolation and isolation, that sense of, well, we're going to die here.
Can you imagine being in that position? Just put in my head, like he said, in that, right when that was happening. And getting all of that information when the radio start working. They're 5 days away, that they should have been there already. There's no water supply. You don't even have 3/4 of the men that you got there that's supposed to be there. It's a dire situation. Guys, I have goose pimple over my body because this can't be good. It can't be. Let me brace myself. Here goes.
To make matters even worse, the RAF was dropping vital supplies of food and ammunition at prearranged landing zones, not realizing they'd been overrun by Germans. The British soldiers in Oosterbeek actually watched almost 90% of the drops fall into enemy hands. So the Germans must have felt optimistic, but they were reckoning without Robert Kane. His job was to defend the tip of the horseshoe by the river. This was the short straw, because if the Germans came through here, they'd cut everyone off, and the Brits would be finished.
Oh, wow.
That night, an eerie silence descended on the bridge. Everyone knew that meant the British holding the north end had finally surrendered, and as a result, the Germans could now turn all their attention to the siege of Oosterbeek.
Oof.
What's more, as the British forces grew weaker, the Germans were being reinforced with men and equipment from home. Equipment that included their most formidable battle weapon.
What's that?
The Tiger tank was the king of the German divisions, the biggest armoured vehicle they'd ever made. It weighed 57 tons. Its armour plating was 4 inches thick. The shells it fired were from an 88mm gun. It could blow anything to Kingdom Come with complete impunity. And a herd of them was headed straight for Kane's position. On the second day of the siege...
What? What? So you know that whatever they had cannot pierce through the thickness of that armored truck. My mind is like, my body, I have goosebumps. I'm like, it's like I don't want to hear what happened next, but I want to hear what happened next, guys. It's like, damn. Here we go.
Day of the siege, a Tiger tank rumbled down the street at the top of that bank over there. Now, Major Kane was down here on this piece of waste ground, armed with a Piat gun. Now, British troops hated these things. It was a botched piece of design. It was heavy, it was ungainly, it was inaccurate, and the shell it fired was virtually useless against all known sorts of German armour. And those were the good things about it.
What?
The bad thing was trying to cock it. You had to stand on the end like that and then pull it up
to tighten the spring, which isn't so bad now because the spring's 60 years old and quite weak. But back then that would often take 2 guys. And then, once it was done, you had to seat the shell, which meant feeding it in like this. It's immensely fiddly even today. So what it must have been like when you had 50 tons of Tiger tank bearing down on you. Isn't bear thinking about.
Exactly.
Kane managed to load the Piat by himself and take up position behind a little hut. He waited for the Tiger to be 30 yards away, took aim and fired. It was a good shot. The shell went right underneath the tank and blew up, causing no damage whatsoever. All it did was alert the crew inside to the fact that he was there. A shell from the tank's 88mm gun blew the hut to smithereens, but at the last second, Kane grabbed his Piat gun and ran for cover past the tank's machine gun to a laundry. And once he got there, he reloaded the Piat and got ready to fire it again. The second shot was as good as the first, but the effect was exactly the same as well. Nothing. So the tank turned its gun again and fired again. And this time it killed Kane's spotter, Lieutenant Ian Meikler.
Now, at this point, a sane man would have got out of there. But you've got to remember, Kane had lost 100 of his men by this stage. He wasn't in the mood for getting out. So, as the dust cleared, no one could quite believe their eyes, because he was lying in completely open ground, facing down a Tiger tank.
I was close enough to see exactly what happened. I think he altered his position to kneeling, and we can see in the distance a tank. I was absolutely certain he was going to die there.
Kept on shouting, load, load, and firing at the tank.
He fired for a third time, and this time his shell hit the Tiger's only Achilles heel. He blew one of its tracks off, immobilizing it.
What?
And you could see the track of the tank come away and lob on its sides.
Kane had no time to celebrate, though, because almost immediately another Tiger rolled into view on the road up there. He dived behind the wall of the laundry again, reloaded his Piat again, and then stepped out to take a shot at it. But he pulled the trigger a fraction of a second too soon. So the shell clipped the wall of the laundry and blew up just a few feet in front of his face.
There was a flash, and he immediately fell over.
And it was horrifying. When I got to him, his face was black, but totally black, and with little spots of blood all the way around. What, 30, 40, 50, whatever it was. And he was saying, I'm blind, I can't see.
So several of his men carried him away to the cops, 10, 15 yards away.
I stayed with him no more than 6 or 7 paces, I shouldn't think, holding his hand.
It seemed like he was finished.
Woo. Woo. Guys. I can't believe someone it's like he's not human. It's just the way that he is going at it, like in the fight for, you know, and he said, listen, with the last breath I have in me, or whatever I have to do, I gotta do what I gotta do because there's so much loss so far. And the adrenaline and the anger that they talk about in part 1, I think that's what kept him going. But now that he's blind, he's blinded from... Oh. can't help but tears for him. I don't know. Oh, let's see what happens next.
But 45 minutes later, he was back. His sight had returned, and that was enough. The shrapnel wounds he would cope with.
What?
And this chap came out of the copse with his face blackened. And he got down immediately on the pier gun. I was staggered, utterly staggered. I thought, well, he must be a very brave man to be knocked out, probably, and then come back and take up the same position and still hit tanks.
I couldn't understand why such a brave man didn't say, well, I've had enough. He'd done his lot and still kept going.
But it was still firing when we left.
I know I just paused. What? What? He kept going 45 minutes later? Just looking at these men, hearing their first-hand explanation because they witnessed this and see the tears in their eyes. Ooh. Ooh. It's like, he's like, why did he not give up when he said that a while ago? I'm like, because he's done his lot, he has done his best, and he kept going. Now this man needs 3 medals, 4 medals. Woo.
At the end of that day, day 2 of the siege, Kane, according to eyewitnesses, had destroyed 3 tanks. No one had ever done that before. He had begun to win his VC. This lump of bronze is only big enough to produce 80 more medals. But there's no need to panic about it running out just yet, because over the years it's become harder and harder to win a Victoria Cross. In the early days, simply whirling your sword at a heathen was often enough, but that changed toward the end of the First World War, and the figures back this up. In World War I, 634 medals were awarded, but in World War II, that dropped to just 182.
Oh, wow.
The bar had been raised to an almost impossible height.
During the Arnhem Battle, a glider pilot called Lieutenant Mike Dauncey found himself defending a sector very close to where Robert Kane was. Here's the report. It says the position was continually attacked by superior forces of enemy tanks and infantry. On 3 occasions, the enemy overran the sector, necessitating a counterattack. Dauncey led each sortie with such determination that the positions were regained with heavy loss to the enemy. In the face of heavy small arms and mortar fire, he personally attacked machine gun posts with complete disregard for his own safety. The next day, the Germans attacked again with tanks and self-propelled guns. This time, Dauncey lost the sight of one eye. In spite of the pain, though, he refused to be evacuated. And then on the next day, they came back with tanks again. His men withdrew, and he was left alone, facing down a tank. He threw a gammon bomb through its hatch and blew it up. Now, for this, he was recommended for a VC, but they turned him down. That's how hard it had become to win one.
He did all that and didn't get a VC? Eyes gone, left alone, end up throwing down something in a tank, blew it up, and still didn't get it? Oy, man, superhuman he is, superhuman.
Since the end of the Second World War to the present day, only 11 VCs have been won, and this creates a problem. The fewer VC winners there are, the greater the burden of living in its spotlight.
I'd sooner have back with me the pals my buddies, my comrades back with me rather than any medal.
In 1951, Private William Speakman was part of a battalion of the Black Watch Regiment defending a hilltop in Korea. The hill was attacked by 6,000 Chinese soldiers, and with the Black Watch troops outnumbered by 12 to 1, the situation looked bleak. But as the hill was about to be overrun, Speakman appeared like a 6'4" human grenade launcher.
And I thought, well, all this stuff has been done. We've primed them. I might as well use the bloody things, you know. So that's it. And we went up there and we just did it.
10 times he went back for more grenades, and then when they ran out, he lobbed beer bottles and ration tins at the Chinese, anything he could get his hands on. Eventually the attack was broken, and Speakman was a hero, but he found it hard to cope with the attention the VC brought. He told one reporter that the medal made him feel like a freak in a freak show.
Sometimes it gets a little bit too much. Not sometimes, a lot of the time it gets too much. People try to do something for you. They try to say thank you in their own little way. They say, well, tell me what happened. You either don't want to, or sometimes you just say, well, no, I've forgotten all about it now. And that's the truth. It's a bit overwhelming for an ordinary person.
The difficulty with the...
Wow. He did all that. And it boils back down right to when they're talking about humility. Listen, it's a bit too much. And not only that, you don't want to keep reliving the past. I think he wants to forget about that, because maybe he had close friends and, maybe all relatives that was taken in when that was happening. So sometimes you just don't want to talk about it. You just want to forget it. I guess that's where he's coming from. And then he said he feels like, oh, you're such a sweetheart. He's such a sweetheart. But, and I think a lot of us need to take into consideration that, it's not something that they want to relive all the time. But yet still we're so proud and so happy that he received it, so wow, it's just man.
A Victoria Cross or an award of that standing being awarded is you were just beginning to get over the shock and the horror of what you've been through. And then you're given this award and you have to relive it all over again, probably for the rest of your life, because people will be asking you about it for the rest of your life.
Just said that, relive it. Said it. Keep reliving and living, and they don't want to.
They're
it's just so much.
Just incredible people.
They are.
I'm being soft about them, because they were tough men in their day. But when I first started being involved with the association, there were 450 alive, and now there are only 15. So there's been a lot of sadness. But we've had some incredible times together.
The last two VCs, both posthumous, were won in the Falklands War 21 years ago. And the reason it's been such a long time is quite straightforward.
Modern warfare with remote control weapon systems arguably separates you from the enemy in a way that hasn't happened in past wars. It gives you an idea of how rarely you can justify a VC and how infrequently the opportunity, and it doesn't need an opportunity, the opportunity to win a VC comes past your door.
The days of soldiers sticking their heads above the parapet and taking out half the enemy with nothing but a fruit knife are gone. The days of soldiers like this man, Gurkha rifleman Lakiman Gurung.
In Burma, on May the 13th, 1945, Gurung was manning the most forward post of his platoon when 200 Japanese soldiers attacked the position. Grenades were thrown into his trench, which rifleman Gurung snatched up and threw back. Unfortunately, the third grenade exploded in his hand, blowing off his fingers, shattering his right arm and severely wounding him in the face, body and right leg. For the next 4 hours, wave after wave of fanatical attacks were thrown in by the enemy and all were repulsed. Even though Girlz, alone in his trench, had to load and fire his rifle using only his left hand. Of the 87 enemy dead counted in the vicinity after the battle, 31 lay in front of Girlz's position. 31.
So, is the...
He kept going after everything happened to him. He just kept going and just kept going. 31. With one on. These people don't sound human. They don't sound human to me at all. It's like they're superhuman with the... Man.
So, is the greatest medal in the world in danger of becoming extinct? Will those 7 in the safe at Hancock's Jewellers ever be engraved?
I think it would be quite wrong to say that there will never be an opportunity for a Victoria Cross to be won in future warfare. There will be opportunities. There will always be personal braveries in an intensive operation, a long drawn-out operation, that deserves that reward.
There would be certainly plenty in this generation who would be candidates for being awarded the Victoria Cross. Courage isn't lost from mankind.
That's true.
It's just the circumstances.
Yeah. Yep.
Back on the banks of the Rhine, Major Robert Kane was into the 3rd day of the siege of Oosterbeek, and the Germans had changed their tactics. Possibly fed up with losing so many tanks, they decided to batter the British into submission with constant shelling and mortar fire. The Germans, by this stage, had ringed the British positions with 100 artillery guns, along with 12 of the dreaded Nebelwerfers, multi-barreled mortars which fired 6 bombs at a time. Somehow this bombardment seemed to inspire Kane, driving him to ever greater feats of bravery.
While most of the troops kept their heads down and their fingers crossed, hoping a shell wouldn't land on them, he went in search of tanks. Witnesses spoke of a madman running through a hailstorm of fire in these very streets, with his trousers torn off, blood pouring from wounds in his legs, firing his Piat at tank after tank after tank.
And they said he's firing, some were saying he's firing the Piat from the hip, like a bloody cowboy.
There was this figure, wounded, bandaged, dirty, dishevelled, but still coming round, still wherever the point of danger was, still encouraging the men all the time.
Some were saying he'd knocked 4, 5, 6 tanks out.
Yeah, you can put yourself in the Germans' position and saying, whoever's knocking out these tanks must be, well, someone out of this world, I'll say.
I said it's gotta be out of
In
this
his
world.
diary, he says his feet felt like they had 1,000 pins sticking in them and that his socks filled with blood. Later in the day, he says he felt something hot and sticky running down the side of his face. Turns out he'd fired so many shells, one of his eardrums had burst.
He disregarded his own wounds. He was wounded, seriously wounded and bleeding and torn to shreds, yet he fought on because that was his duty. He refused to go back for medical treatment until there was a lull in the battle. He fought with a total focus on what he was meant to be doing, and many VC holders have this sense of focus. They have a focus that sees that clearly what they've got to do, and they must do that regardless of the effect it has on his own life. And this selflessness is perhaps the key issue in winning a VC.
Selfless.
To understand just how important this business of selflessness is, you need to know the story of John Cruikshank.
It's like I said before. the humility, the selflessness. It's like they're out of this world. The adrenaline, the focus, everything comes into play. It's like, this is what I'm here for. I need to get it done. Not only that, I have others that are depending on me. This country depends on me. My fellow men depend on me. And I got to do what I got to do. I am not important at this time. I need to get the work done. And just listening to Kane's story, I'm like, I'm so amazed. I'm so flabbergasted. I am in awe, and my respects to him, his family, his generation after that, and on and on and on. And to all the VC winners, she said 450 that has come across her, 456 or somewhere there, that have come across to her, to the 15 that is living, or to the amount that is living. My bad with the numbers, guys, because my mind is going 50. My mouth is going faster than how my mind is going right now. Or my mind is, or the other way around. I'm just yapping. It's just like, I'm just awestruck. I can't believe that one person. And then, not to mention the Gurkhas. I've heard the name before, and I'm going to look into them. This is just amazing, guys, just to my little mind to comprehend how these humans can behave in such a way, so selfless, so selflessly. See, that's pretty much it.
Cruikshank was the captain of a Catalina flying boat, which was very badly shot up during a suicidal attack on a U-boat. Although he sank the U-boat, one of his crew was killed, 3 others injured, and Cruikshank himself was hit 72 times, including wounds to both lungs. So there he is, with his lungs hemorrhaging, slipping in and out of consciousness and barely able to breathe. But he was determined to bring the wounded crew home safely, so he kept the plane in the air for an hour until the sea conditions were safe enough for a landing. And that's an amazing story. But it's not as amazing as what the Secretary of State has written here. He says, I think that the VC has been earned in this case, although an element of self-preservation enters into it. And that's the tricky bit. You see, if you're the captain of an aeroplane, you bring it back and therefore save the lives of everyone on board. You also save your own life. You can't really win.
Arnhem was a lost cause too. There were so many wounded British soldiers by the 4th day of the siege that the Germans sportingly arranged a ceasefire so they could be evacuated.
Kane could have gone. He was a wreck. He was half blind, he was half deaf, his legs were perforated with machine gun and shrapnel wounds. But he chose to stay, and that meant he was still here on the 5th day of the siege.
They did a ceasefire because there was so much wounded for people to get help. And you're telling me that Kane decided that he's staying? He's not leaving to get treated? On the 5th day, so that's the 5th day that the men that should be there coming in? No. No.
This, in the Germans' eyes, was doomsday, the day when they'd mount their biggest push. They threw everything at the British: tanks, artillery, flamethrowers, mortars, the lot. The British had arrived in Arnhem with supplies for 3 days. This was their 9th and the 5th in the hell of Oosterbeek. It was shaping up to be the shortest firefight in history. But Major Kane had other ideas.
Kane found himself down by the church, and pretty soon he was out of ammunition for his Piat. So he switched to a mortar like this. Now, the idea of a mortar is that you jam it into the ground, you drop the shell into the tube, it fires up in the air and lands on the German positions. But the Germans were so close that he was firing it like this, like a normal gun. Now, imagine what that must have looked like from a German's point of view. This man with his trousers blown off, caked in blood, with sticky stuff coming down the side of his face, firing a mortar horizontally at you. It must have been unnerving.
Exactly.
In Kane's VC citation, it says of the events of that day, By a skillful use of this weapon and his daring leadership of the few men still under his command, he completely demoralised the enemy, who, after an engagement lasting more than 3 hours, withdrew in disorder. Robert Kane had turned the tide in the battle, and this is another vital factor in winning a Victoria Cross. Your actions have to create a ripple effect. They have to help save the day.
Okay. Got it. Yes. Yes. Video. Your action has to have a ripple. Isn't that something? The tide has turned. Look at him. Wow. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Wow.
Monday, it was the final day of the battle, and the Germans, that was 9th SS Panzer Division, have been trying since the Friday to break Major Kane's block, because that was the key to cutting us off from the whole division off from the river, and we would have been finished. Yeah. We all knew that. I mean, it was obvious to us all, but he made sure that they didn't get through, to his great credit.
His action had tremendous impact on the troops as a whole, and probably helped them keep their resolve and help win the battle out of proportion to the size of his own personal command.
It was the most wonderful example to everyone.
A major firing at tanks is something you don't hear of, really.
We all wanted to emulate him, of course, which we tried to do to our best ability.
The effect that Major Robert Kane had on the men was obviously his leadership, and the fact that they were on the defensive, but he was moving, he was showing himself, he was rallying where there was the greatest danger, and that has the most huge impact upon people who have just got to stay there and endure and be brave. They need something to focus upon. He was that focus.
He led by example completely. I mean, I'm sure that whoever got back over that river of the South Staffords could owe that fact to Bob Kane. Wow. Nobody else, because it was his example that rallied them.
His bravery was suicidal and utterly selfless. His tank-killing antics rallied the troops, beat off the enemy, and helped keep the defences at Oosterbeek intact. These were the reasons why this man won a Victoria Cross.
Wow.
And not just any VC either. According to his commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Derek McCarty, it was the finest Victoria Cross of the whole war.
After the Germans withdrew, the British, out of ammo, food and ideas, and knowing by this stage that the Second Army wasn't coming, silently crossed the river at night to safety. Kane knew they were retreating, but he didn't want to look beaten.
Wow. Wow. So many life lost. Look at all these headstones. Oh. But the Germans did get the fight of their life. And guess what? They did prevail eventually.
After the war, he left the army and went back to working for Shell in Nigeria and the Far East. He died of cancer in 1974.
Oh.
Sadly, That meant I never met him, which is a shame for two reasons. Firstly, because I'm absolutely fascinated by VC winners. And secondly, because I'm married to his daughter. She didn't even know he'd won a Victoria Cross until after he'd died.
What?
He never thought to mention it.
What?
You know,
Wow.
we've a rather warped sense of what constitutes bravery these days. I mean, even David Beckham is called a hero for scoring a penalty.
Yep.
But when you look at VC winners and hear their stories, well, enough said.
Yeah. Definitely. Now that's a shocker ending. He is married to his daughter, and she didn't know that her father won a VC. Can you imagine how humble he is and how humble he was? He didn't even tell his own child, because like she said, most of them don't want to keep reliving, and with humility they don't read to, they don't want to gloat with the fact that they own a VC. Amazing. Listen, Major Kane, just listening to his story. Yes, Bambi. Just listening to his story, my respects, like I said, to him, to his family, to everyone. Yes. Yes. It's just amazing. I'm awestruck. I have respect for him, his family, to all BC winners, to all who have served. Don't get me wrong. But man, selflessness, humility, anger driven in the right direction, focus. It's all there. I hope you guys, boy, man, I'm lost for words to even explain how just listening to the story of his life, just words can express how I really feel, or just watching this. Thanks for the request. I know it's not from Timeline, but this was an amazing story. I enjoy listening to Jeremy Clarkson's how he did this documentary. Yes, some of it may have a little be muted, but you all got the meat of things in this. Don't forget to go in the comment section. Tell me what you'd like me to react to next. It's your island girl, and we're running out of here because it's summer break. Kids have their fort behind me. Like I said, my little mess that is making me so, but they're having their fun. I love you guys, and I'll definitely catch you guys in another video. All right? Bye. Wow. Gurkha's video, the Gurkha video is coming next. And there's another one, The Greatest Raid. I'm looking at it right now. That one, I will be also doing that one as well. All right, guys? Catch you in another one. Bye.